Undercover black CEO notices his employee with baby living in a car. Next day he did this. The mop made a wet slapping sound against the concrete floor as Malik Ford worked it back and forth across the warehouse corridor. No one noticed him, not the forklift operators zooming past with their loads, not the inventory managers scanning boxes, not even the shift supervisor who'd walked right by him twice without a single nod of acknowledgement. Just another invisible janitor in gray overalls, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. That was exactly what he wanted. 3 months ago, Malik had been sitting in his penthouse office overlooking downtown, reviewing quarterly reports when the numbers from the West Side Distribution Center caught his eye. Employee turnover had doubled in 6 months. Budget discrepancies showed up as miscellaneous expenses, totaling nearly $100,000. Customer complaints were up 18%. Something's rotten in Denmark, Malik had muttered to himself, setting aside the designer fountain pen he'd been given at last year's CEO Excellence Awards. At 42, Malik Ford had built Flex Forward Logistics from a 3-person delivery service into a multi-million-dollar operation with 15 distribution centers across 4 states. He'd started with one beat-up van and a dream after leaving the military. Now he employed over 2,000 people and had contracts with some of the biggest retailers in the country. But success had its price: distance. These days, he rarely saw the actual workings of his warehouses. He moved through a world of board meetings, investor calls, and strategy sessions. The last time he'd walked a warehouse floor without a PR team and regional executives hovering around him had been, he couldn't even remember. Which was why tonight, he was pushing a mop instead of signing contracts. "Miles! Break room needs attention. Someone spilled coffee all over the place," called out the night manager, barely glancing his way. "Yes, sir," Malik replied, hunching his shoulders slightly, adopting the deferential posture he'd observed in service workers who'd become invisible to their bosses. It had taken only 2 nights for the night staff to stop giving the new guy more than passing instructions. In the break room, Malik found more than a coffee spill. The small, cramped space was a mess of crumpled wrappers, abandoned coffee cups, and overflowing trash bins. He set to work, watching from the corner of his eye as 2 supervisors entered, deep in conversation. "Johnson's breathing down my neck about those missing pallets again," the taller one said, pouring himself coffee. "Tell him what we always do: processing error. Inventory will correct itself next quarter," the other replied with a dismissive wave. "He's too busy planning his next golf trip to actually check the logs." Johnson was Richard Johnson, the regional manager Malik had personally promoted 3 years ago. The man who'd assured him the high turnover was just market adjustments, and the budget issues were temporary system glitches. Malik scrubbed harder at a non-existent stain, ears perked. "What about the new delivery schedule? It's ruining the night crew. 3 people quit last week," the tall supervisor continued. "That's the beauty of it. We're saving a fortune on overtime, and corporate just sees improved efficiency metrics. Nobody's checking if the same people are clocking those hours." The second man laughed. "By the way, did you remove those security logs I mentioned?" They moved toward the door, voices dropping. Malik's grip tightened on the mop handle. This wasn't just mismanagement. This sounded like deliberate manipulation. He'd built Flex Forward on principles of employee dignity and fair treatment. His father had been a warehouse worker for 30 years, coming home with aching joints and stories of disrespect. Malik had sworn his company would be different. Had he failed so completely? The door swung open again, startling him from his thoughts. A young woman entered, dark circles prominent under her eyes. Her uniform, the cashier's polo from the small convenience store attached to the warehouse, was slightly wrinkled. She glanced at Malik, then did something that surprised him. She smiled. "Hey, you're new, right? Miles?" she asked, moving to the coffee machine. Malik nodded, surprised to be recognized. "Started Monday. I'm Alina." She poured coffee into 2 cups. "Want some? You've been at it for hours." The simple gesture, being seen, being offered something, hit Malik with unexpected force. When was the last time someone had offered him anything without wanting something in return? "Thanks," he said, accepting the cup. "Rough night?" Alina shrugged. "Double shift. Store until 10, then inventory until 6. Not my first rodeo." She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. A small, delicate tattoo of a bird peeked out from her wrist. "Double shifts common around here?" Malik asked, careful to keep his tone casual. "For some of us." Something flitted across her face, worry, perhaps, or resignation. "The extra hours help." "Well, back to it." She raised her cup in a small salute and headed out. Over the next week, Malik settled into his role. The night shift had its own rhythm, its own hierarchy. He watched, he listened, he learned. He observed managers falsifying time cards, recording hours for employees who weren't there. He saw inventory being marked as damage that looked perfectly fine to him. And most disturbing of all, he witnessed multiple employees asking about assistance programs, childcare help, emergency loans, housing support, only to be brushed off or given paperwork that mysteriously never made it to processing. Flex Forward had a robust employee assistance program. He'd made sure of it personally. Yet somehow, at this facility, those resources seemed to vanish into thin air. Alina was the only constant bright spot. She always acknowledged him, sometimes bringing him coffee, once sharing half a sandwich when he mentioned forgetting his lunch. Her kindness stood out in stark contrast to the indifference around them. He noticed she never complained, even when the shift supervisor berated her for a registered discrepancy that wasn't her fault. She simply nodded and fixed the issue. One night, as Malik was emptying trash bins near the employee lockers, he overheard Alina on the phone, her voice tense and low. "I know the payment is late again. I'm working doubles this week. Yes, I understand there's a waiting list for the shelter. No, my sister can't." She broke off, listening, then sighed. "I'll figure something out. Thank you anyway." She ended the call, pressing her forehead against the cool metal of the locker. For a moment, her shoulders shook. Then, as if remembering where she was, she straightened, wiped her eyes, and returned to the storefront. Something about her demeanor, the practiced way she composed herself, the quiet dignity, reminded Malik of his mother after his father's death. Working 2 jobs, never letting her children see her cry, always figuring something out. That night, after his shift ended, Malik didn't go back to the modest hotel room he'd rented near the warehouse. Instead, he made his way to the small security office. The night security guard, an older man named Ellis who spent most shifts dozing in front of basketball reruns, had already left for his 3 a.m. patrol, which Malik had observed was actually a 30-minute nap in his car. Malik had accidentally spilled coffee on Ellis's keyboard 2 days ago, necessitating a replacement. The new one had a tiny keylogger, unethical perhaps, but Malik needed to know what was happening in his company. He accessed the security system and began scrolling through camera footage from the past few weeks. What he saw in those early morning hours would change everything, not just for Alina, but for the entire culture of the company he'd built. The security office hummed with the sound of cooling fans from a dozen monitors. Malik leaned forward, his eyes burning from staring at screens for nearly 2 hours. He'd been methodical, starting with footage from the loading docks where he suspected inventory was disappearing, then moving to the management offices where time cards were processed. What he found confirmed his suspicions: boxes being loaded into personal vehicles after hours, supervisors clocking in absent employees, paperwork being shredded. The corruption was systematic, deliberate, and widespread. But nothing prepared him for what he discovered when he switched to the parking lot cameras. It was footage from 3 weeks ago, timestamped 2:37 a.m. The lot was nearly empty except for a few cars, including a small, dented blue sedan parked at the far corner. As Malik watched, a figure approached the car, Alina, still in her work uniform. She opened the back door and leaned in, emerging with a bundle in her arms. A baby. Malik's breath caught. The infant couldn't have been more than a few months old, bundled against the bitter February cold. Alina cradled the child, bouncing gently as she moved to the trunk, retrieving what looked like baby formula and bottles. She returned to the back seat, arranging blankets, creating a makeshift bed. For nearly 20 minutes, she sat in the car with the engine running, presumably for heat, before finally turning it off and settling into the reclined driver's seat, the baby secure in the back. "She's living in her car," Malik whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He scrolled backward, finding the same pattern night after night. Alina, working her shift, then returning to her car, her home, in the company parking lot. Some nights she didn't turn on the engine at all, suggesting she didn't have enough gas to spare for heat. The timestamp on one video caught his eye, January 28th, when temperatures had dropped below freezing for a week straight. He clicked play and watched as Alina, clutching her child, approached the warehouse office entrance. Inside, she stood before someone seated at a desk, Martin Reeves, the HR coordinator. The security footage had no audio, but the body language told the story. Alina, shoulders hunched, gesturing with one hand while holding her baby. Martin, leaning back in his chair, shaking his head. At one point, he slid a form across the desk, which Alina hastily filled out with her child balanced on her lap. Martin took the paper, glanced at it, and placed it in a drawer, not the filing cabinet, but his desk drawer. Then he stood, clearly dismissing her. As Alina turned to leave, the camera caught her face, a mask of quiet desperation. Malik's hands balled into fists. Flex Forward had an emergency housing assistance program specifically for situations like this. He'd implemented it himself after a warehouse fire in Phoenix left 3 employees temporarily homeless. The fund provided immediate hotel vouchers and rental assistance for up to 3 months. He rapidly searched through more footage, finding 2 more instances where Alina had approached managers about her situation. Each time, she was rebuffed. The final attempt showed Reeves accompanied by Sandra Wilson, the operations manager, both shaking their heads as Alina stood before them, visibly fighting tears. "This is criminal," Malik muttered, his voice echoing in the empty room. The betrayal burned in his chest. He'd built this company from nothing, working 18-hour days, sacrificing relationships and health, all with the vision of creating a workplace where people were treated with dignity. His father had died at 52 from a heart attack, worn down by years of physical labor and stress in a warehouse that treated him as replaceable. Malik had sworn his employees would never face that fate. Yet here was Alina, hardworking, kind Alina who never complained, sleeping in a freezing car with her infant, while his managers denied her the very help he'd established. The next segment of footage showed something that broke through Malik's mounting rage. It was from just last week, around midnight. Alina sat in her car, cradling her fussing baby, tears streaming down her face. She was singing something, rocking gently. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a toy elephant the size of her palm. She placed it next to the baby, who immediately quieted, tiny fingers wrapping around it. It was the gesture of a mother doing everything possible with nearly nothing at all. Malik clicked to another angle, watching as Alina eventually reclined her seat, one hand resting protectively on her child in the back. The timestamp rolled forward, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., until her alarm apparently went off at 4:30 a.m. She startled awake, checked on her baby, and quickly freshened up using a water bottle and small towel before preparing for another shift. He'd seen enough. Closing the security program, Malik sat back in the chair, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance, or cooking the books. This was human suffering, preventable suffering, happening under his company's roof. He pulled out his phone, not the prepaid one he'd been using as miles, but his personal device. The time showed 4:17 a.m. In less than 3 hours, Alina would arrive for another shift, another day of pretending everything was fine, another night of caring for her child in a parking lot. Malik scrolled to a contact labeled Clara Kim, legal, and pressed call. When a groggy voice answered, he spoke with quiet intensity. "Clara, it's Malik. I need you to clear your schedule today. We have a situation that can't wait." He ended the call and stared at the blank monitors, the reflection of his face grim in the darkened glass. He had started this undercover mission to find missing inventory and budget discrepancies. Instead, he'd found the heart of his company had been hollowed out from within. And he wasn't going to wait another day to set it right. Malik sat in his hotel room, surrounded by printouts and his laptop screen's pale glow. He'd called in sick to his janitorial shift, the first time Miles had missed work. The irony wasn't lost on him. As CEO, he rarely took sick days. As a janitor, he felt the anxiety of potentially losing a day's wages. Clara Kim had arrived at the hotel by 9 a.m., confusion evident on her face when she found her boss in jeans and a faded t-shirt instead of his usual tailored suits. "You look like hell," she'd said, setting down her briefcase. "Wait until you see what I found." For the next hour, Malik had briefed her on his undercover operation and discoveries, watching her expression shift from surprise to shock to barely contained fury. Clara had been with him almost from the beginning, FlexForward's second employee after his college roommate. She believed in the company's mission as deeply as he did. "I need complete access," Malik had told her. "Every personnel file, every financial record, every email from the West Side location for the past year. And I need it without anyone knowing it's coming from the top." Clara had made it happen, using her legal authority to request an internal compliance audit. By afternoon, Malik had remote access to the facility's complete digital records. Now, 12 hours later, the truth lay scattered across his bed in printed spreadsheets and highlighted emails. "It's worse than I thought," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. The Employee Relief Fund for the West Side location showed a zero balance on paper. According to official records, all $175,000 allocated for the year had been distributed to employees in need. The paperwork seemed impeccable: request forms, approval signatures, disbursement records. Except none of it matched reality. Malik had cross-referenced every employee who'd supposedly received assistance. 3 had left the company months before their emergency housing payments. 2 others didn't even exist, ghost employees created in the system. The rest, when he checked their personnel files, showed no record of ever applying for assistance. The money had vanished, but where? The answer came in a seemingly unrelated file: travel expenses for Regional Manager Richard Johnson. Over the past 9 months, Johnson had charged the company for 12 client development trips to destinations including Cabo San Lucas, Miami, and Aspen. Each trip coincided with a large withdrawal from the Employee Relief Fund. "Client development, my ass," Malik growled, pulling up Johnson's calendar. Not a single legitimate client meeting appeared on any of these trips. But Johnson couldn't have done this alone. Malik dug deeper, following the digital trail. Each fraudulent disbursement required 3 approvals: the HR coordinator, the operations manager, and the regional manager. Martin Reeves, Sandra Wilson, and Richard Johnson, the same trio who had repeatedly turned away Alina. The pieces snapped into hideous clarity when Malik discovered an email thread between the 3, carefully hidden in a folder labeled Facilities Maintenance Records. From R. Johnson at flexforward.com to M. Reeves at flexforward.com, S. Wilson at flexforward.com. Subject: Q3 adjustments. Need to move another $42K from the relief fund for the Lake Tahoe conference. Process it through the usual channels. 3 fictional emergencies should cover it. Sandra, create the employee profiles. Martin, backdate the applications to August. I'll sign off once it's ready. Also, we're getting too many legitimate assistance requests. Start implementing stricter qualification reviews. If they push back, tell them corporate has frozen the funds temporarily. Most of them don't have the energy to fight the system. Remember, bonuses depend on showing improved profit margins for the quarter. Every dollar we save is another step toward that beach house. Malik's hand trembled as he forwarded the email to Clara, adding a single line. "Get me everything on these 3. Everything." He stood up, pacing the small hotel room. This wasn't just fraud, it was deliberate cruelty. They had systematically denied help to desperate employees while stealing the very funds meant to assist them, all to line their own pockets and boost their performance bonuses. A notification pinged on his laptop. Clara had sent financial records for Johnson, Reeves, and Wilson. Malik scrolled through bank statements, property records, and credit reports. Johnson had purchased a vacation condo in Palm Springs 6 months ago, $560,000, paid with a suspiciously small mortgage. Reeves was leasing a new BMW he couldn't possibly afford on his salary. Wilson had taken 3 luxury cruises in the past year. Meanwhile, Alina and her baby slept in a car in the company parking lot. Malik remembered his father coming home one winter night, limping badly. When questioned, he'd reluctantly admitted his supervisor had denied his request for proper safety boots, despite company policy. Budget constraints, he'd been told. 2 weeks later, that same supervisor had shown up driving a new truck. Nothing changes unless someone forces it to, his father had said bitterly. Malik had sworn then that he would be that force of change. Now, facing the same corruption in his own company, the weight of his failure pressed down on him. He had built systems to protect his employees, written policies ensuring their dignity and well-being. But systems were only as good as the people running them. His phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Found something else. Johnson's quarterly reports. Numbers massaged to hide turnover rates and inflate productivity. Half their efficiency improvements came from cutting critical support staff. Another piece clicked into place. The managers hadn't just stolen from the relief fund, they'd created a pressure cooker environment that drove away experienced employees, replacing them with desperate workers who would accept any conditions. People like Elena, single parents who needed work badly enough to endure double shifts and ignored pleas for help. The exploitation was comprehensive, designed to extract maximum profit while presenting a shining facade to corporate. And he, focused on expansion and dazzled by impressive metrics, had missed it completely. Enough research, Malik said aloud, closing his laptop with a snap. He knew what was happening now. The extent of the corruption, the players involved, the money trail, all of it documented and preserved. But knowing wasn't enough. Alina and her baby wouldn't have a safe place to sleep tonight because of spreadsheets and email evidence. Malik checked the time, 8:14 p.m. Alina would be midway through her convenience store shift. He grabbed his car keys and the janitor's uniform he'd been wearing for the past 2 weeks. Tonight, Miles the janitor would do more than just watch. The temperature had dropped to 28 degrees by the time Malik pulled into the warehouse parking lot. A rare late-season snowfall had started, delicate flakes swirling under the harsh security lights. He parked several spaces away from Alina's blue sedan, watching as she emerged from the store entrance, shoulders hunched against the cold. From his car, he could see her routine: the quick walk to her vehicle, the careful opening of the back door, the gentle lift of her sleeping baby. Tonight, though, something was different. Even from a distance, Malik could see the infant was fussing, tiny arms flailing against the blanket. Malik grabbed the bags from his passenger seat and approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. He'd stopped at a 24-hour superstore on the way, filling a cart with necessities: a heavy-duty emergency blanket with battery heating, baby formula, diapers, warm clothes, ready-to-eat meals, and a small electric kettle that could plug into a car adapter. "Alina?" he called softly when he was a few yards away. She whirled around, instinctively clutching her baby closer. Recognition flickered across her face, followed immediately by shame. "Miles." She stopped, clearly embarrassed to be caught in her circumstances. "I brought some things," he said simply, holding up the bags. "Saw the temperature dropping and thought you might need them." Suspicion replaced embarrassment. "Why would you do that?" Before Malik could answer, the baby let out a harsh, rattling cough that seemed too powerful for such a tiny body. Alina's face transformed with worry as she pressed a hand to the infant's forehead. "He's burning up," she whispered, panic edging into her voice. Malik set the bags down and moved closer. "How long has he been sick?" "It started as a sniffle yesterday, but now..." Another cough shook the baby's frame, followed by a wheezing intake of breath. I gave him the last of the children's medicine this morning. You need to get him to a doctor, Malik said firmly. Alina's laugh was brittle. With what insurance? What money? She bounced the baby gently, her voice dropping. I've been giving him warm baths in the employee restroom, but it's not helping anymore. The infant's cough worsened, a wet, crackling sound that raised alarms in Malik's mind. His nephew had developed pneumonia last year after a simple cold. The pediatrician had emphasized how quickly it could turn dangerous in babies. There's a 24-hour clinic on Westbrook Avenue, he said, making a decision. I'll drive you. Right now. I can't afford. I know someone there, Malik improvised. They help people without asking too many questions. Another harsh cough from the baby made the decision for her. Okay, she whispered. Malik quickly transferred the car seat to his SUV, along with Alina's meager belongings, a duffel bag containing clothes and baby supplies. As they drove, the infant's breathing grew more labored. Alina sat in the back beside him, singing softly, her voice trembling. His name is Noah, she said suddenly, as if needing Malik to know this wasn't just any sick baby. He's 4 months old. He's beautiful, Malik said sincerely. Does he usually sleep through the night? The simple question, one parent to another, seemed to break something in Alina. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stroked Noah's flushed face. He was such a good sleeper until we lost our apartment. Now he wakes up constantly. The car's either too cold or too hot. I tried to keep the engine running for heat, but gas is so expensive. She took a shuddering breath. I never thought I'd end up like this. I had plans, you know? I was halfway through nursing school when I got pregnant. Malik gripped the steering wheel tighter. What happened? Noah's father left when I told him. My landlord doubled the rent. I took the job at Flex Forward because they promised benefits and assistance programs. She laughed bitterly. Every time I apply for help, they say the funds are depleted or I don't qualify. Last month, Sandra told me to make better life choices when I asked about emergency housing. The casual cruelty of it made Malik's jaw clench. They arrived at the clinic, a small building with a brightly lit waiting room. Inside, Malik approached the receptionist, speaking quietly. He pressed his credit card into her hand, making it clear cost wasn't an issue. 20 minutes later, a doctor was examining Noah, his expression serious as he listened to the baby's chest. Early pneumonia, he confirmed. He'll need antibiotics and breathing treatments. Ideally, he should be in a warm, humid environment. He glanced at Alina's worn clothes and exhausted face, making his own assessment of her situation. Is there somewhere stable you can stay for a few days? Before Alina could answer, Malik stepped forward. Yes, there is. While Noah received his first breathing treatment, Malik stepped outside to make calls. First to Clara, updating her on the situation and setting new plans in motion. Then to Diane Russell, a social worker who ran a foundation Malik had established 3 years ago to help families in crisis. It's an emergency, he told Diane. Single mother, infant with pneumonia, currently homeless. I need temporary housing tonight and a path to permanent solution. When he returned, Alina was sitting beside Noah, who was sleeping peacefully with a small oxygen monitor clipped to his toe. The medicine had already eased his breathing. The doctor says we can leave once this treatment finishes, she said, not meeting Malik's eyes. Thank you for all of this. I don't know how I'll repay you. You don't need to, Malik replied, sitting beside her. I want to help Alina. Not just tonight. She finally looked at him, really looked, as if seeing beyond the janitor's uniform for the first time. Why? Nobody helps without wanting something. My father worked in warehouses his entire life, Malik said quietly. He died young because the company he gave everything to didn't care if he lived or died. I swore I'd never be the kind of person who walks past someone in need. A fragile trust formed between them in that sterile clinic room, not romantic, but deeply human. A connection forged in crisis and kindness. I was going to be a nurse, Alina confessed, watching Noah's chest rise and fall. I wanted to help people heal. That's still my dream, even after everything. Malik nodded, a plan taking shape in his mind. Dreams don't expire, Alina. They just wait for the right moment. His phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Suite reserved at extended stay hotel. 3 weeks paid. We'll meet you there with supplies. Long-term housing application expedited. Let's get Noah somewhere warm tonight, Malik said, showing her the message. Tomorrow, we can talk about making things right. Making what right? Alina asked, confusion crossing her tired face. Everything, Malik replied, already thinking about Monday morning and what needed to be done. Absolutely everything. The West Side Distribution Center hummed with its usual Monday morning chaos. Forklifts beeping, scanners chirping, managers barking orders. At precisely 9 a.m., a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the reserved spot marked Executive Visitors Only. Inside, Malik adjusted his tie, a world away from the janitor's uniform he'd worn for 2 weeks. Ready? Clara asked from the passenger seat, a leather portfolio in her hands. Malik nodded, his face set with determination. More than ready. They entered through the main entrance, bypassing the security checkpoint with a flash of Malik's ID badge. The receptionist's eyes widened in recognition. Mr. Ford. We didn't know you were visiting today. Should I call Mr. Johnson? No need, Malik replied smoothly. I'd like this to be a surprise inspection. Please announce a mandatory all-staff meeting in the main warehouse floor in 15 minutes. Word of the CEO's unexpected arrival spread like wildfire. By the time Malik and Clara reached the warehouse floor, Richard Johnson was rushing toward them, his usual polished demeanor cracking around the edges. Malik! What a pleasant surprise! Johnson extended his hand, which Malik deliberately ignored. Had I known you were coming, I would have prepared a proper welcome. I'm sure you would have, Malik replied coolly. Is the audiovisual system in the warehouse working? I'll need a microphone and the large display screens. Johnson's smile faltered. Of course, but perhaps we should talk in my office first? I have some outstanding quarterly figures to share. I'm sure you do, Malik said. But today, I have something to share with you, and everyone else. The confusion on Johnson's face might have been comical under different circumstances. Behind him, Sandra Wilson and Martin Reeves hovered nervously, exchanging glances. By 9:30, nearly 200 employees had gathered on the warehouse floor. Loading dock workers stood beside inventory specialists. Administrative staff mingled with maintenance personnel. At the back of the crowd, Malik spotted a familiar face. Alina had come in for her shift, looking better rested than he'd ever seen her, though still wary. The overhead lights dimmed as Malik stepped onto the small platform that had been hastily arranged. The large screens behind him flickered to life. Good morning, he began, his voice amplified through the speakers. For those who don't know me, I'm Malik Ford, CEO of Flex Forward Logistics. A murmur rippled through the crowd. But for the past 2 weeks, many of you have known me as Miles, the night shift janitor. The murmur became a wave of gasps and whispers. From his elevated position, Malik watched Johnson's face drain of color. In the back, Alina's eyes widened in shock. I came here because the numbers from this facility didn't add up. Turnover rates too high. Budget discrepancies too frequent. Customer complaints increasing. Malik paused, his gaze sweeping the room. But what I found was far worse than accounting errors. I found a complete betrayal of everything this company stands for. He nodded to Clara, who pressed a button on her tablet. The screens behind him displayed security footage. The night Alina had approached HR about housing assistance, followed by footage of her sleeping in her car with Noah. This is Alina Torres, Malik continued, his voice tight with controlled anger. One of our hardest working employees. A single mother putting herself through nursing school. She asked for help through our Employee Relief Fund 3 separate times. Each time, she was told no funds were available. Another nod to Clara. The screens changed to show the incriminating emails between Johnson, Wilson, and Reeves. The funds were available. Over $175,000 set aside to help employees in crisis. But this money was systematically stolen, redirected to fake employee claims, then used to fund luxury vacations, new cars, and personal bonuses. The room had gone deathly silent. Johnson took a step toward the platform, but Clara moved smoothly to block his path. This wasn't just theft from the company, Malik continued, his voice rising. It was theft from every one of you. From your security. From your dignity. And in Alina's case, it forced a mother and her infant to live in a car during the coldest months of the year. A child who developed pneumonia because the people entrusted with employee welfare cared more about their beach houses than a baby's life. The silence broke. Angry voices rose from every corner. Years of frustration and mistreatment found their voice all at once. Malik raised his hand, and the room gradually quieted. Richard Johnson, Sandra Wilson, and Martin Reeves, you are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. The evidence of your crimes has been turned over to the district attorney's office. Johnson's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. I built this facility from nothing. Those relief funds were just sitting there, unused. Unused because you denied every legitimate request. Malik cut him off. My father died working in a warehouse where managers like you put profits over people. I built Flex Forward to be different. I failed to see what was happening here, and for that, I owe every person in this room an apology. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Throughout the room, employees straightened, many nodding in acknowledgement. Starting today, things change. Malik continued. Every employee assistance application from the past year will be reviewed. Those who were wrongfully denied help will receive retroactive benefits plus compensation. The Employee Relief Fund will be tripled and placed under direct oversight from our Corporate Ethics Department. He then outlined a series of immediate changes: increased wages, improved health benefits, more flexible scheduling for parents, and a new management team drawn from experienced floor workers who understood operations from the ground up. In the back of the room, Alina stood motionless, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of humiliation, but of vindication. Of relief. One last thing, Malik said as security officers moved to escort the disgraced managers from the building. Flex Forward was founded on a simple principle: everyone deserves dignity at work. I lost sight of that principle by becoming too distant from the day-to-day reality of our warehouses. That ends today. He stepped down from the platform and walked directly to where Alina stood. Thank you, he said loud enough for nearby workers to hear, for reminding me what matters. The warehouse erupted in applause, not the obligatory kind given to visiting executives, but a genuine release of emotion. As the noise washed over them, Alina looked up at Malik, the man she'd known as the kind janitor who'd brought her coffee and saved her son. What happens now? She asked softly. No, Malik replied with quiet certainty. We rebuild. 2 months later, Malik stood in the doorway of what had once been Richard Johnson's opulent office. The space had been transformed, the mahogany desk and leather executive chair replaced by modular furniture and collaborative workstations. Where golf trophies and vanity awards had once dominated the shelves, community recognition certificates and employee appreciation notes now covered a bulletin board. Quite a change, said Eleanor Washington, stepping up beside him. Malik smiled at the former social worker who now headed HR for the West Side facility. You're doing, not mine. Not true. You gave me the budget and the authority, but this. She gestured to the revitalized space. This came from listening to what people actually needed. In the 2 months since the dramatic confrontation, the warehouse had undergone a profound transformation. The toxic management had been replaced by people chosen for their empathy as much as their competence. Turnover had dropped by 67% already. Productivity, contrary to what Johnson had claimed was only possible through pressure and fear, had increased by nearly 15%. The Dorm to Work program starts next week, Eleanor continued as they walked through the facility. We've partnered with Horizon Housing to convert that vacant building next door into 30 affordable studio apartments. Priority goes to employees facing housing insecurity. Malik nodded, satisfaction warming him. The partnership with the nonprofit housing developer had come together with remarkable speed once funding was secured. The first phase would provide immediate housing relief. The second phase, already under construction, would include a childcare center and community space. "And how's our nursing student doing?" he asked. Eleanor's smile widened. "See for yourself." They rounded the corner to what had been an underutilized storage area. Now it housed the newly established Employee Wellness Center, a bright, welcoming space with comfortable seating, private consultation rooms, and a small medical station for basic health needs. Inside, Alina was explaining health insurance options to a young warehouse worker, her confidence evident in her posture and calm, knowledgeable tone. Noah, now plump-cheeked and bright-eyed at 6 months old, played contentedly in a playpen beside her desk. "The premium seems high, but with the company's new 80% contribution, you'll actually pay less out of pocket," she was saying. "And your children will be fully covered with no deductible." The employee, a single father Malik recognized from the loading dock, nodded gratefully. "And you mentioned housing concerns?" Alina continued, pulling out a tablet. "Let me tell you about the dorm-to-work program starting next week. I've already helped 3 families apply." Malik hung back, not wanting to interrupt. Alina's new role as Employee Resource Coordinator had been created specifically for her strengths. Part-time work that accommodated her nursing school schedule, while allowing her to help others navigate the support systems she once found impenetrable. When the employee left with a stack of completed applications, Alina looked up and spotted Malik. "Mr. Ford." She greeted him with a warm smile, so different from the exhausted, wary expression she'd worn during his undercover days. "I wasn't expecting you today. Just checking in," he replied, entering the space. "And please, it's Malik. Mr. Ford makes me feel like my father." She laughed, picking up Noah, who was reaching for her. "Old habits. We just processed the 15th retroactive relief payment today. The Martinez family got their security deposit and first month's rent covered after being denied 3 times last year." "And how's school?" Malik asked, smiling as Noah grabbed at his tie. Pride flashed across Alina's face. "I aced my pharmacology midterm. 2 more semesters until I can apply for the registered nurse program." Eleanor excused herself to take a call, leaving them alone. "I never properly thanked you," Alina said after a moment. "Not just for Noah and me, but for everyone here. It's like breathing different air now." Malik shook his head. "I should be thanking you. I'd lost touch with what mattered. Building this company was never about profit margins or expansion. It was about creating a place where people could work with dignity. Like your father would have wanted," Alina said softly. "Exactly like that." Outside the window, employees moved with purpose across the warehouse floor. Gone was the frantic, fear-driven pace. Instead, there was the steady rhythm of people working together, secure in the knowledge that they were valued. Later that afternoon, Malik walked the floor alone, nodding to employees who now met his eyes with respect rather than apprehension. He paused by a loading bay where a team was efficiently processing a complex shipment, joking easily with one another as they worked. His phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "Board presentation ready for tomorrow. Financial projections show West Side model can be implemented company-wide without significant profit impact. Employee satisfaction metrics already setting records." Malik smiled, pocketing his phone without replying. The numbers would take care of themselves. What mattered was what couldn't be quantified: the restoration of trust, the creation of genuine security, the honoring of human dignity. He thought of his father, who had never lived to see his son build a company, let alone transform one. "The measure of a good job isn't your title or your paycheck," his father had often said. "It's whether you can look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day." For the first time in years, Malik felt the full truth of those words. In a quiet corner of the warehouse, he spotted a janitor carefully mopping a spill, taking pride in work most would overlook. The man glanced up, and Malik nodded in recognition, one essential worker to another. The company hadn't just given Alina a job. It had given Malik back his purpose. He wasn't just running a business anymore. He was fulfilling the promise he'd made standing at his father's grave, to create workplaces where people could thrive, not merely survive. As he walked toward the exit, Malik passed the Employee Wellness Center again. Through the window, he could see Alina showing a young mother how to complete an education assistance application, Noah playing contentedly nearby. The woman was nodding, hope gradually replacing the worry on her face. This, Malik thought, was what success actually looked like. Not numbers on a quarterly report or awards on a shelf, but human beings helping each other rise. The night watch hadn't just been watching after all. It had been remembering, reclaiming, and rebuilding, one person, one story, one act of dignity at a time.